Ruthless bikers surround a family at a truck stop. The dad's actions shock everyone. The hum of the tires against the open highway had been the only sound for miles. Michael Carson adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, glancing over at his wife, Emily, who was asleep in the passenger seat. In the back, their two children, Liam and Sophie, were dozing against each other, lulled by the steady rhythm of the road. The neon glow of a truck stop sign broke through the darkness, flickering against the windshield. Last fuel for 50 miles. Michael sighed. They'd need to stop, even though something in his gut told him to keep driving. He pulled the truck into the lot, rolling to a stop near the pumps. The truck stop was mostly empty, save for a few rigs parked in the distance and a lone cashier visible through the glass doors of the convenience store. It was the kind of place that felt frozen in time, fluorescent lights buzzing, faded signs advertising coffee and cheap meals. Emily stirred, blinking awake. "Where are we?" she murmured, rubbing her eyes. "Fuel stop," Michael said. "Kids okay?" She turned, checking on them. Liam was still curled up, his little hand clenching a toy car. Sophie, always the lighter sleeper, peeked at her father with groggy eyes. "Are we there yet?" she asked softly. Michael chuckled. "Not yet, kiddo. Just stretching our legs." As he stepped out of the truck, the cool night air hit him. He swiped his card at the pump, inserting the nozzle into the tank. That's when he heard it, the distant rumble of motorcycles. At first, it was faint. A low growl rolling over the pavement. Then, it got louder. Closer. Michael's fingers tensed around the fuel pump. From the highway, a group of motorcycles came roaring into view. 6 of them. They pulled into the truck stop like they owned the place, their headlights slicing through the night. Black leather jackets, heavy boots, chrome glinting under the artificial lights. Michael kept his posture relaxed, but inside, his pulse quickened. Emily noticed them too. She leaned forward in her seat, watching as the bikers parked their machines in a loose semicircle, not at the pumps, not in the designated parking spots, but around them. Sophie sat up straight, rubbing her eyes. "Who are they?" Michael didn't answer. One of the bikers, a massive man with a shaved head and a thick, jagged scar across his cheek, swung off his bike. His jacket bore the emblem of a black vulture with its wings spread wide. Michael's stomach tightened. He knew that symbol. The man, Axel, took his time, rolling his shoulders as he locked eyes with Michael. The other bikers followed his gaze, their expressions unreadable. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Michael, do you know them?" He exhaled slowly. "I did." Axel's lips curled into a smirk. Well. Look who we have here." His voice was rough, carrying the weight of old memories. "Michael Carson. Didn't think I'd see you again." Michael didn't move. Emily's grip on Sophie tightened. Axel took a slow step forward, his boots scraping against the pavement. "You've been keeping busy, huh?" He glanced at the truck. "Family man now. Didn't see that coming." Michael's expression remained neutral, but inside, his mind raced. Axel's tone was mocking, but there was something else in it. Something darker. Michael wasn't just a random target. This was deliberate. The past had finally caught up with him. Axel turned his head slightly, and 2 of the bikers moved, positioning themselves near the truck doors. Michael noticed immediately. His jaw clenched. Sophie looked up at him. "Daddy?" Michael's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Stay in the truck, sweetheart." Liam stirred in the back seat, waking up. "What's going on?" Emily's hand found Michael's. He gave it a light squeeze before stepping away from the truck, facing Axel directly. "I don't want trouble," he said. Axel chuckled. "Trouble? You think this is trouble?" He spread his arms, gesturing to his men. "Nah. We're just here to catch up." One of the bikers, a wiry man with a long, greasy ponytail, spoke up. We heard you went soft, Carson. His eyes flickered toward Emily and the kids. Looks like they were right. Michael stayed silent, his muscles coiled beneath his jacket. Axel took another step forward. The space between them was shrinking. Michael knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a reunion. This was a test. Michael stood his ground, his eyes locked on Axel. The bikers around him shifted slightly, closing the circle. Their leather jackets rustled, the heavy boots scraping against the pavement in slow, deliberate movements. Emily's breathing was shallow. She clutched Sophie close, whispering something reassuring, though Michael knew she was just as tense as he was. Axel tilted his head. What's the matter, Carson? You look like you've seen a ghost. Michael exhaled slowly, his mind already working through possible exits, but there weren't many. He could hear Liam shifting in the back seat, his small fingers pressing against the glass as he tried to understand what was happening. I don't want trouble, Michael repeated, his tone calm but firm. Axel's smirk widened. Yeah, you said that already. But see, that's the problem with you, Carson. You think you can just walk away, start fresh, pretend like none of it ever happened. He took a step closer. But that's not how the world works. Not our world. Michael's jaw clenched. He wasn't going to play into Axel's mind games. He needed to stay focused, needed to get his family out of this. One of the bikers, a lanky man with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, snorted. You know what's funny? The last time we saw you, you were running. Just turned your back and left, like a damn coward. Michael's shoulders tightened. He could feel Emily's eyes on him, filled with questions she wasn't asking, not yet. Axel chuckled, looking at the others. That's right, isn't it? He just up and vanished on us. His smirk dropped slightly. Left some people in a real bad spot. Michael's fingers twitched. His past wasn't something he was proud of. He had been part of something violent, something dangerous. He had walked away from that life for a reason. People made their choices, Michael said, his voice steady. I made mine. Axel's expression darkened. Yeah. And now, we're making ours. He snapped his fingers. Two bikers moved toward the truck. Emily stiffened. Don't, she said, her voice shaking but strong. Sophie whimpered, burying her face into her mother's jacket. Michael reacted instantly. His arm shot out, grabbing the closest biker by the wrist before he could reach the door handle. In one swift motion, he twisted sharply. The biker yelped in pain, stumbling back. The second one hesitated. Axel's expression barely changed. Michael dropped his voice, low and controlled. If you touch that door again, I won't be so nice next time. The biker hesitated, rubbing his wrist where Michael had grabbed him. His eyes flickered toward Axel, waiting for a cue. Axel exhaled through his nose, then grinned. See? That's what I wanted to see. That's the Carson I remember. Michael remained motionless. Axel gestured toward the truck with a lazy wave of his hand. You got yourself a nice little setup here. Wife. Kids. A real family man. His eyes flicked toward Emily. Guess I should say congratulations. Emily stared daggers at him. Axel smirked, turning his gaze back to Michael. But let's be real. We both know this. He gestured around them. This ain't you. Not really. You might have changed your clothes, got yourself a 9-to-5, but deep down... His smirk twisted into something cruel. You're still one of us. Michael's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The past he had buried was clawing its way back up. Axel took another step closer, so close that Michael could smell the leather and gasoline on him. I got a proposition for you, Carson. One fight. One clean fight. You win. We leave. No hard feelings. Michael frowned. And if I lose? Axel's smile was all teeth. Then we take what we're owed. His meaning was clear. The truck. The money. Everything. Emily sucked in a sharp breath. Michael, no. Michael didn't answer right away. Axel let the words sink in, then added, or, you could just let us take what we want now. Save yourself the trouble. The bikers chuckled darkly. Michael's grip tightened into fists. He looked at Emily, then at Liam and Sophie, who were still pressed against the glass inside the truck. His children. His world. His past had caught up to him. And now it was demanding payment. Michael had a choice to make. And he already knew his answer. Michael stood frozen for a moment, calculating. His past was staring him in the face, demanding an answer. Axel wanted him to fight, to prove he was still the man he once was. But this wasn't about ego. It wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Emily's hand found his wrist. Michael, we can just go, she whispered urgently. We can get in the truck and drive. Please. He wanted that more than anything. But he knew Axel wouldn't let them leave. Not yet. Michael turned back to Axel, keeping his voice even. And if I don't fight? Axel smirked, shaking his head. Then we take what we want. He nodded toward the truck. Might be your cash. Might be your keys. Might be something else. Michael's stomach turned. The laughter from the bikers was low, but it twisted like a knife in his gut. His kids were watching. Liam, his little hands pressed against the glass. Sophie, her tiny fingers gripping Emily's sleeve. He exhaled sharply. One fight. That's it. Axel grinned like a wolf. That's it. Michael rolled his shoulders, loosening his stance. He wasn't young anymore. He hadn't been in a real fight for years. But he still remembered. Axel gestured to one of his men, a hulking brute with a shaved head and arms the size of tree trunks. Rex. Michael clenched his jaw. He knew Rex. Back in the day, Rex was their enforcer. He wasn't fast, but he was strong. And he liked to hurt people. Michael's fists curled. This wouldn't be easy. Rex cracked his knuckles and stepped forward. Been a long time, Carson. His voice was a gravelly growl. Let's see if you're still worth a damn. Axel raised his hands. Rules are simple. First one who can't get back up loses. Michael nodded once, then met Emily's gaze. Her eyes were filled with fear. I'll end this fast, he murmured. She swallowed hard. Just come back to us. Michael stepped forward. Rex didn't wait. He lunged. Michael dodged left, just barely. A fist like a hammer grazed past his ribs, the force enough to rattle his bones. He spun, bringing up his own fist, driving it into Rex's ribs. It was like punching a brick wall. Rex grunted, barely fazed. That all you got? He taunted. Michael didn't answer. He had to be smarter. Rex was strong, but he was slow. Michael danced back, forcing him to overcommit. Rex swung again, a heavy, looping right hook. Michael saw it coming. He ducked, slid inside the punch, and drove his elbow into Rex's jaw. Crack. Rex stumbled, shaking his head. You son of a... Michael didn't give him time to recover. He moved in fast, striking sharp. A fist to the ribs. A jab to the throat. A knee to the gut. Rex dropped to one knee, gasping for air. The bikers were watching in stunned silence. Axel's grin faltered. Michael stepped back, breathing hard. Stay down, Rex. For a second, it seemed like it was over. Then Rex roared and surged forward, grabbing Michael by the throat. Damn it. Michael struggled, his vision blurring as the grip tightened. Emily screamed his name. But Michael wasn't done. He brought up his knee, hard, right into Rex's ribs. The big man gasped, faltered. Michael tore himself free, twisted, and slammed his elbow into the side of Rex's head. Rex collapsed onto the pavement. Silence. Michael staggered back, breathing hard. Rex didn't get up. Axel exhaled through his nose, rubbing his jaw. Damn. Michael straightened. It's over. Axel smirked. Oh no, Carson. We're just getting started. Michael stood over Rex's unconscious body, his breath coming in sharp, measured inhales. His hands ached from the force of his strikes, but his adrenaline masked the pain. Around him, the other bikers had gone silent. The laughter, the jeering, all gone. Axel was watching him with a strange expression, somewhere between amusement and something darker. Emily's voice broke the silence. It's over, right? Michael turned, looking at her, at the kid still pressed against the truck window. Sophie's eyes were wide, filled with confusion. Liam had his fists clenched like he wanted to fight too. Michael hated that they had to see this. He nodded to Emily. Yeah. It's over. But Axel's chuckle made his stomach twist. No, it wasn't. Axel clapped his hands slowly, shaking his head with a grin. Not bad, Carson. I'll admit, you're not as washed up as I thought. Michael didn't respond. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He just wanted to get his family out of here. Axel's grin widened. But you know what? That was just the warm-up. Michael's shoulders stiffened. That wasn't the deal. Axel spread his arms. Oh, come on. That was nothing. Just a little reminder of the old days. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. We both know you're better than that. You still got it, don't you? Michael didn't blink. I don't fight for fun anymore. Axel tilted his head. Who said anything about fun? He jerked his chin toward his men. You see, my boys here, they need a lesson. And what better way to teach them than by letting them see what a real fighter looks like? Michael's chest tightened. He knew what Axel was doing. The gang leader wasn't just looking for a fight. He was looking for control. Michael sighed. We had a deal, Axel. Axel smirked. And we're making a new one. He turned toward his men, his voice carrying across the truck stop. One last fight. One real fight. Me and Carson. No interruptions. No backing out. Winner takes all. Michael's stomach dropped. Emily stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. No. Absolutely not. Axel barely glanced at her. This isn't your decision, sweetheart. Michael turned to his wife. Emily. No. She was furious now, her voice shaking. You already proved yourself. We should just get in the truck and leave. Michael wanted to. God, he wanted to. But he knew Axel wouldn't let them go that easily. Axel was still watching, waiting. He tapped his fingers against his belt, his posture relaxed. But his eyes, those told another story. This was personal. Michael inhaled deeply. What happens if I say no? Axel's smirk returned. Then we still take what we want. Emily went pale. Michael's hands curled into fists. This wasn't just about pride. It wasn't about settling old scores. This was about his family. He looked at Sophie, at Liam. He would never let anything happen to them. He turned back to Axel. Fine. One last fight. Axel's smirk widened. Now we're talking. Emily reached for his arm. Michael, please. He turned to her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. Trust me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. She didn't have a choice. Axel cracked his knuckles, rolling his shoulders. Let's see if the legend still lives up to the name. Michael stepped forward. No more talking. It was time to end this. The air at the truck stop thickened with anticipation. The circle of bikers widened, their boots scraping against the pavement as they took a few steps back. This was it. Michael rolled his shoulders, shaking out his hands. He had to be smart. Axel was fast, and he fought dirty. This wouldn't be a fair fight. Axel smirked, stretching his arms out. You remember the rules, right, Carson? First one who can't get up loses. Michael gave a slow nod. He already knew how this would go. Axel wouldn't stop until one of them was on the ground. Michael just had to make sure it wasn't him. Emily's voice cut through the noise. Michael, don't do this. He turned, looking at her one last time. Her eyes were full of fear, of love, of pleading. I'll be fine, he said. She didn't believe him. He wasn't sure if he believed it either. Axel moved first. Fast. A vicious right hook shot toward Michael's jaw. He barely dodged, the wind from Axel's fist brushing past his face. Michael countered immediately, slamming his fist into Axel's ribs. Solid. Axel grunted but barely moved. He was tougher than Rex. A sharp elbow came from nowhere, smashing into Michael's side. Pain exploded in his ribs. Michael staggered, but he didn't go down. Axel grinned. Slower than I remember. Michael ignored the taunt. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about surviving. Axel threw another punch. Michael ducked, moved in close, and drove his knee into Axel's gut. Axel stumbled back, coughing. The bikers roared in approval, some cheering for Axel, some now watching Michael with newfound respect. Michael didn't hesitate. He stepped in again, jab, jab, elbow. Each strike sharp, controlled, but Axel absorbed them like a wall. Then he switched tactics. Axel faked left, then slammed his forehead into Michael's face. Everything flashed white. Michael reeled back, blood running from his nose. Axel lunged. Michael felt an arm lock around his throat. A chokehold. The world started to blur. He heard Emily scream his name. Michael gritted his teeth. Not like this. He shifted his weight, planting his foot against Axel's knee. Then, in one swift motion, he threw his entire body backward, slamming Axel into the pavement. Axel gasped, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Michael rolled free, sucking in air. The bikers watched in stunned silence. Axel got up, slower this time, wiping blood from his lip. He locked eyes with Michael. For the first time tonight, his smirk was gone. Michael stood, breathing hard. No fear. No hesitation. Axel exhaled, flexing his fingers. All right. He nodded. Then he stepped back. Michael's fists tightened. We done. Axel's expression shifted, something between admiration and resentment. Yeah, he muttered. Michael stayed ready. Axel turned to his men. We're leaving. Some of them looked confused. A few hesitated. But they obeyed. The tension in Michael's chest eased slightly. He turned to Emily. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Michael finally allowed himself to breathe. It was over. Or so he thought. Because as Axel walked toward his bike, he paused. Without turning back, he said just loud enough for Michael to hear. You think this is over? It's not. Then, with a low growl of his engine, he rode into the night. Michael watched the taillights fade. His gut told him this wasn't the last time they would cross paths. But for tonight, his family was safe. And that was all that mattered. Michael stood in the dim truck stop parking lot, his breath still uneven, his hands aching from the fight. Blood trickled from a small cut on his cheek, mixing with the sweat on his skin. His chest rose and fell in deep, measured inhales. The roar of motorcycles faded into the distance as Axel and his gang disappeared into the night. The tension that had gripped the air for the past hour slowly began to unravel. Emily clung to him, her body trembling. Michael, her voice was barely above a whisper. He wrapped his arms around her, pressing his forehead against hers. "It's over," he murmured. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes filled with worry and relief. "Is it?" Michael didn't answer. Liam and Sophie ran toward them, their small feet slapping against the pavement. Sophie crashed into his leg, her arms wrapping tightly around him. "Daddy! You're bleeding." Liam, his brows furrowed in confusion, looked up at him. "Why did they want to fight you?" Michael crouched, wincing slightly as his ribs protested the movement. He placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "Because sometimes," Michael said carefully, "people don't like it when you walk away from something they still believe in." Liam frowned. "That doesn't make sense." Michael gave a tired smile. "It doesn't always." Sophie's little fingers traced the dried blood on his knuckles. "Did you win?" Michael hesitated before answering. "I kept us safe. That's all that matters." Emily's arms tightened around herself. "They'll come back, won't they?" Michael's jaw clenched. He glanced toward the road where Axel had vanished. He'd known Axel a long time, long enough to understand what that last warning meant. "This isn't over," Michael admitted. "But it's over for tonight." Emily exhaled sharply. "That's not exactly comforting." Michael turned to her, placing a steadying hand on her arm. "We'll be okay." She searched his face for a long moment, then finally, slowly, nodded. The soft crunch of boots on gravel caught Michael's attention. One of the truckers, a tall man with a gray beard and a denim jacket, stepped out of the diner, his hands in his pockets. He'd been watching. "You all right?" he asked. Michael nodded. "We're fine." The trucker's eyes flicked toward the road. "Those guys, they trouble?" Michael exhaled. "They were." The trucker nodded slowly, then glanced at Emily and the kids. "Brave thing you did, standing your ground like that." Michael shook his head. "Wasn't about bravery." The trucker chuckled. "No? Looked like it from where I was standing." Michael didn't argue. The trucker sighed, then pointed toward the highway. "You got a long road ahead. You should get moving before they change their minds." Michael agreed. He turned to Emily. "Let's get out of here." She didn't need to be told twice. Michael opened the truck door, lifting Sophie into her seat. Liam climbed in beside her, still looking deep in thought. Emily slid into the passenger seat, fastening her belt with shaky hands. Michael took one last look at the truck stop, the flickering lights, the empty lot, the quiet hum of the neon sign. A place that had nearly become something worse. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. For a while, they drove in silence. Then, Liam spoke from the back. "Dad?" Michael glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, bud? Were you one of them before?" Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "A long time ago." Liam processed that. "But you're not anymore?" Michael met his son's gaze in the mirror. "No," he said firmly. "Not anymore." Sophie yawned, curling into her seat. "Good," she murmured sleepily. Emily reached over, lacing her fingers with Michael's. No words needed to be said. Outside, the dark highway stretched before them. The night was quiet again. But Michael knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere out there, Axel was waiting. And when that day came, Michael would be ready. For now, he just kept driving. His family was safe. That was all that mattered.